Assalamualaikum and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Cyberview's fourth live panel discussion. And I'm Nadia from Cyberview. I'll be your moderator for today. Now, before we start, let me share with you a bit about what we are going to discuss today, which is transforming Malaysia's healthcare through innovation and disruptive technology. Now, with new technologies such as AI, robotics, and smart health devices, today's healthcare industry continues to see revolutionary progress across the globe. In 2019, in fact, the global smart healthcare market value was at 143.6 billion US dollars and is estimated to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 16.2% from 2020 to 2027. Now, the adoption of smart healthcare solutions has increased substantially in the past few years due to the rising usage of smartphones and digitalization. These days, patients are no longer passive participants in their health journeys. Instead, they are expected to play a more active role in their healthcare development. And this is all possible with, of course, emerging healthcare technologies that we are seeing today. As we know also, the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated this phenomenon. And at Cyberview, we champion Cyberjaya as a vibrant global tech hub. And as a tech hub developer of Cyberjaya, Cyberview fully understands the importance of driving digitalisation, a word that we've been hearing a lot these days in the healthcare sector, that will not only benefit Malaysians, but also contribute to the growth of the nation's economy, especially in today's new normal. Now, today we look forward to discussing and deep diving into the changing landscape of healthcare and the growing demand for smart healthcare solutions in Malaysia. And this is also very dear to Cyberjaya because as you know, under the new Cyberjaya master plan, we are focusing on three tech clusters, especially in the southern zone of Cyberjaya, and this includes smart healthcare. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our guest panelists. Now we have James Then. He is the Managing Director of CryoCord Group, a technology leader and the largest and most comprehensive stem cell bank in Southeast Asia. He has spent over the 18 years with CryoCord and is one of the founders of the company. Apart from being a board member of various companies, he is the current vice president of MACT, which is the Malaysian Association for Cellular Therapy, and was the active in TWG, which is Therapeutics Working Group of National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency for the drafting of cell and gene therapy guidelines. Our second panelist is Professor Dr. Mudiarasan Kuppusamy Arasan, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Business and Technology at University of Cyberjaya. He is an experienced senior academician in the field of digital business and has worked in various renowned universities. He is also an avid trainer and lecturer in the digital and business data science space. Arasan is a certified digital marketing specialist and conducts training, consultancy, and development projects in the field of market growth and digital strategy design. He has also been involved in applied projects in Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Welcome, Prof. Our third panelist is Dr. Ian Ng, founder and CEO of Vita, a health app that provides visual insights to health data. The app is integrated with laboratory information systems to provide a historical health record and early warning to future risk of chronic disease using artificial intelligence. Dr. Ian is an occupational health doctor with years of experience in conducting corporate wellness programs and medical surveillance for companies. Vita is also a graduate of our Cyberview Living Lab Accelerator program for the CLLA. So welcome back, Dr. Ian. Now, thank you to all of our esteemed panelists for being part of today's discussion. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone that we will be opening up the floor for a Q&A session towards the end of the session, but you can submit your ideas, inquiries, questions throughout the discussion at any time through the Q&A chat box that we have here in the Zoom platform. So once again, welcome to everyone who is just joining in for the Cyberview webinar. Now, my first question, I have two questions to start off with. It's for Mr. James. Now, very quickly, CryoCord has made remarkable strides as a technology leader in the field of long-term stem cells not just in Malaysia, but in Southeast Asia. Now, the stem cells industry could be still new to many of us. Can you tell us a little bit, just very briefly, what is exactly stem cell banking?
Hi, Nadia. Morning. Morning, everybody. Stem cells banking, we started standard banking in 2002, 18 years ago. We stored the umbilical cord blood. As you know, cord blood contains lots of these blood stem cells, which is good for transplants. Those days, a lot of transplants use bone marrow. Okay, and then they found that cord blood is equally viable for certain diseases. So people has been banking cord blood stem cells for ages now. And then we move on to another type of stem cell known as the mesenchymal. Mesenchymal stem cells has since the last 20 years, 6 countries already approved the use of mesenchymal stem cells on various diseases. These countries include Korea, Canada, New Zealand, Europe, India, and a few more of these countries already approved MSCs. And we also bank the MSCs, mesenchymal stem cells, derived from the umbilical cord. So stem cell banking is basically storing the biological products, the goodies, okay, from the otherwise being thrown away as medical waste from the umbilical cord. Is now we scientists have been able to find that there are just such good stem cells, and why don't we just store it up? Right. So it's a long history. I mean, a lot of country has that. Malaysia, they have a couple of banks. Singapore has few banks in Indonesia, Thailand, Europe, US, everywhere. You know, Korea, Taiwan, China, everywhere has this couple of banks.
Yeah. And this is still something very new in the healthcare industry. So, of course, this is part of the revolution or evolution of smart healthcare. Now, Mr. James, when we talk about smart healthcare, we are face to face with an area that does not have much precedent because it involves the future. So, just like with stem cells, you've mentioned once in an interview actually that while stem cells are a great medical product, they are not a cure all. Treatment for many diseases are still only in the trial stages. So smart healthcare is not necessarily something we know exactly what the outcome will be. How do we overcome this?
I think that is very interesting that smart healthcare, inevitably we're talking about IT that's related to how to apply IT in healthcare. There are companies that actually develop, as far as I know, in the US, that they develop AI towards drug discovery, you know, towards recognition of certain patterns, such as X-ray slides, MRI slides. The AI can able to pick up, can interpret this slide even much more accurate than the radiologist, and able to recommend solution. And the mistakes that AI pick up from such an analysis is quite minimal compared even to the specialist. Now, I have personally exposed to AI simulation and so forth in the year 1991 when I was doing my master's in UK. And one of the questions about, at that time, of course, the hardware wasn't so advanced, but the theory of AI has been very well established. So one of the area that they actually questioned was, what if the machine make a mistake? You know, whose liability is that? Okay, that sort of a regulation has not really put in place yet. I think, again, regulation always come later. You know, you need to have the industry first. You need to have the software. You need to have the application. Then regulation will come in place. So smart technology in healthcare is wonderful. Things are moving that direction. There are companies in, I'm not sure about Malaysia, but Malaysia, there are a few, I think, doing like online bookings for doctors, and this is kind of like, basically it's just database and then and link it to the internet. But really smart healthcare, we are talking about AI interpretation of slides, you know, big database, which is something really cutting edge. You know, that I hope that it's not going to put a lot of this professional out of job, but I think eventually I will hope to see is a kind of another tool, is another analytical tool to help the specialist in what they are doing.
I think that's something we can't deny, that while smart healthcare is a wonderful development, but it will ultimately reduce manpower. But as you mentioned, we're dealing with AI, big data, and this can give a more accurate analysis as compared to when it's done by humans. Now, my next question is for Prof. Arasan. We want to hear about your thoughts on the healthcare industry from an academic perspective. Now, as a certified digital marketing specialist based in a medical university, can you share with us what are your thoughts on the healthcare landscape today? How are healthcare providers adopting these technologies to meet the demands of patients today? And of course, more importantly, how do you think Malaysia is prepared in accepting and implementing not just healthcare technologies, but smart healthcare?
Right.
Prof.
Thank you very much for that question. So from a digital marketing perspective, or rather from marketing perspective, what we see today is that the entire healthcare landscape has evolved in the sense of it has become from a profession within the medical field into a business in the medical field. So if I want to quote you in terms of digital marketing, we today we see a lot more clinics, medical centers, hospitals. We see consistent advertisement, billboards, digital billboards, as well as other platforms, social media platforms. So what happens is that everyone seems to be engaging from a real business perspective. Okay, so there is also a contention that the medical profession has slowly moved away from a profession to a business environment. So we can see that healthcare facilities are spending a lot of money in order to advertise their business, and then they start to understand the whole notion of digital marketing, because they need to compete for the same market. Everyone is competing for the same market. And then, so how is my thoughts on the healthcare landscape today is that they have begun the competition. Everyone is competing for the same level of patients. And then there's going to be extreme level of consistent marketing engagement that will be done by these players. Going to your second question, whether the healthcare providers are adopting technologies to meet the demand by patients today. Yes, as Mr. James highlighted just now, one of the examples we quoted is that there are various applications that exist today, such as Doctor to You, Doctor to Doc to Us, Book Doc, and so on. That is where the doctors are already engaging with their patients through online applications as well as other form of technologies. So what happens is that there is a change in the pattern whereby it is no longer a supply-based pattern, it is rather a demand-based pattern, which means the doctors are getting connected to their future patients or potential patients through technological applications. So this is already, the adoption level is already happening at a very fast rate, right? So what else is happening? Things like Apple Watch, for example, just to give you an idea, Apple Watch is, what happens is as you're wearing that as a patient or a customer, those alert systems that is being sent out in the event of, for example, if you're experiencing irregular heart rhythm, those sort of information is already captured nicely in today's environment. So the question in the context of, let's say, Malaysia, for example, are the healthcare providers doing enough to catch up with technology? It is already happening with the current environment. Naturally, everyone is already engaging well with technology, but I think there are still room for a demand for growth in terms of such demand. One aspects that I would like to highlight here is that the use of technology is pretty much, it is still at urban level. what should happen is the use of technology by the healthcare providers, by doctors, medical centers, clinics, and so on, should actually start to go even to a rural environment. So there needs to be, I'm imagining a service whereby medical service become like Grab or Uber in that sense, whereby they are everywhere and they are available in most of the time. So that's how the level of adoption of technology should move forward. Coming to your third point of is Malaysia, how prepared the Malaysian in terms of accepting and implementing smart healthcare. Um, Smart healthcare concept is something where it is supposed to facilitate better services. So for the medical profession, the concept of smart healthcare ideally is supposed to provide them better services because they'll be able to understand their patients better. The understanding of the patients ideally should allow them to do precision medicine for that matter, right? So it's about understanding the whole analogy and the anatomy of the entire patient so that they should be able to do a bit more customized service in terms of medical service. Smart healthcare will also allow them to do better organization and management of their processes, as well as it gives a better environment for doctors because they are freed up. Their time becomes a bit more free in terms of managing of their patients and going into the a more customized service. Yes, Malaysia seems to be already in the trajectory because I was reading one article the other day where our current Director General, Dr. Isham, he was involved in a particular interview where he spoke about the formation of a special interest group that looks into through a sandbox, new regulations that looks into digital healthcare ideas, research, technical support, as well as escalating smart healthcare further. So it is already happening. However, I presume I foresee this to accelerate further in the near future.
Prof, this could be very important because as we see now, there's a surge of COVID-19 cases in Malaysia, especially in Sabah. Now, I don't have the exact data, but it could be due to the fact that there are many rural areas in Sabah where access to healthcare and also awareness is not really there. So perhaps this is something that Malaysia as a country could look more into developing and using smart healthcare. Because you've mentioned rural areas, so I think this applies greatly to Malaysia.
Just to quote idea, just to give an idea, what you call is, I just read, there's what's happening in our neighbor country, Singapore, for example, is that in order to escalate all community to adopt this digital tracking for COVID-19, they have actually, while they have apps that can similar to our My Sejahtera, they also have a token system where they have embedded certain tracking mechanisms in order to allow elderly community to have the token. Because elderly community, while everyone will have smartphone, they may not download new applications. So this becomes a problem. So in order to avoid that, they've got this token system that allows them to track this elderly community to understand their temperature level and those sort of things. So it goes to all level of the community so that the tracking is nicely.
This is very important because smart healthcare patients are not passive anymore. They have to take a more proactive role in their health. So, this could cause some concern when it comes to senior citizens, the elderly, who, are maybe, they are plagued with lots of different kinds of diseases. But at the same time, we have to educate them to be able to be more proactive in their health. Now, my next question is for Dr. Ian. Dr. Ian, you have certainly proved to be a disruptor to the healthcare industry through the development of the Vita Health app. Again, we are dealing with apps. So what was your inspiration behind this app? And perhaps what were some of the gaps within healthcare that led you to develop this solution?
Thanks, Nadia. Actually, thanks for the compliment, but our app is still quite early, and we're tackling a very big issue in healthcare, as in it's a very well-regulated kind of system here, and it's not easy to actually tackle this industry. So we're just in the beginning, and hopefully we get support from all the stakeholders. So going to your question, inspiration for Vita actually is very simple. As we are developing as a nation, you know that we are exposed to more different health problems compared to before. So let's say 50 years ago, people were dying from malnutrition, more infections due to hygiene issues. Okay, so now we're in the new millennium, and then now we're more going towards chronic disease and lifestyle diseases and stress-associated issues like heart disease. Okay, notwithstanding the COVID pandemic, of course, this is a one-off kind of event, but you know, heart disease is still the #1 killer, and one of the risk factors is stress, right? So we still need a way to actually identify all these risk factors and have that information readily available to us. So that's where our app comes in, you see, because you know, like how we all have a bank account where we can actually know our bank balance, and then we will spend less knowing that we have less bank balance, right? I mean, the same concept goes, if you don't have the information about your health, how do you know how to live your lifestyle? You know, you could be at risk for a lot of diseases, and if you don't know, you're just going to live dangerously. Well, that could be one of the ways, but I mean, it's not a very wise way to live. Like that's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that you need to have information readily available, all the risk factors displayed and easy to understand. Right now, we have an issue where health is very hard to understand for a lot of people. So that's what we try to do at our company here. We make the app very visual. We make it very easy to read. Layman can understand, and this is just to encourage self-care. Like kita jaga kita, right? So you have to actually know your own risk, and then you can act upon it. So yeah,
Ian, I
another
think
another yeah.
many can agree because you've mentioned about heart disease, one of the top diseases that are killing Malaysians, particularly. I think many can agree when we say that. I think the age group for people who are getting heart diseases are getting younger and younger.
Yeah.
We can see that.
And there's a big gap in the market now. You know, like how we don't share information about our health as readily as we do other kinds of information. Well, this is because the industry doesn't like to share information to each other. Hospitals and clinics and all, they are not working together. They are just working separately in silos. Of course, you know, like hospitals want to protect their customer base, you know, and they are afraid that they get sued if they share too much information out there. And one of the ridiculous concept that's happening now is that, let's say if you want to buy medical insurance, right, and you need a medical checkup, well, most of the time the insurance company pays for that, but they don't even give back that information back to you. So I don't know if anyone above 40 over here has tried to buy insurance and they realize that, well, how can you not be allowed to access your own health information, your own health data, even if someone else has paid for you? You know, you still have the right as a patient and as a person to know about your own health. So I mean, this is just a few things, a lot of issues in this industry, but we just try to tackle it one by one. We just want the consumer to start realizing this first, and then realize that health data is valuable to them, and then make it easy to understand. And yeah.
Now, Ian, you've mentioned about a collaborative ecosystem among the health care sector. So at Cyberview, you also understand the importance of a collaborative ecosystem for companies to come together and drive innovative digital disruptions in the healthcare industry, particularly. So as I've mentioned before, under the new Cyberjaya master plan that we have unveiled, we are also focusing on smart healthcare as one of the key tech areas. Now, with this new focus area, Cyberjaya will serve as a hub for the development of new and advanced smart healthcare innovative solutions that will address the health and well-being of Malaysians. Now, my next question goes to Mr. James. Now, CryoCord has been in the Cyberjaya ecosystem, I understand, for 18 years now. You have Brighton Health under your purview, and under CryoCord, the stem cells industry has grown. So, what are your hopes for the healthcare industry within the smart city as well as the nation in general? Mr. James, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, we have been in Cyberjaya for past 18 years precisely because when we started the company, we thought that we are perhaps a bit ahead of time and looking for some government incentive. So that was only available in Cyberjaya. So we had our fair share of tax incentive given by the Ministry of Health. for the initial 5 years, okay, under ITA program. Now, to cut things short, I mean, sorry, can you repeat your question again? What was the last part?
What are your hopes and perhaps aspirations that you would like to see in the development of smart healthcare, and particularly in Cyberjaya,
Yeah,
because as
okay.
you mentioned, this ecosystem has
Yeah.
helped also
Yes. Yes.
CryoCord.
Yeah, I was going to ask just now. I was thinking that is what Cyberview can do is perhaps is to look at the bringing into some of these experts and facilitate um, companies, big and small startups, to achieve their aspiration. Things like what you could do is perhaps a company would like to look for like sensors. Do you have any people who are expert in sensors? Because a lot of this equipment, medical devices, whether you like it or not, like handphones. In our handphone, we have infrared, we have lights, but in the future probably a laser. All these are sensors. So um, some startup may need this type of expertise. Okay, and the other being AI. Do we have any AI experts in Cyberjaya? Okay, uh, and programmers, not just theoretical experts, but uh, hands-on, really hands-on programmers that can really do AI. Okay, I think these are the key elements to bringing the Cyberjaya ecosystem to start something really, really meaningful for what we are doing. Now, for healthcare, I mean, Dr. Ian himself is a medical doctor. Am I right, Dr. Ian? Yeah. So he know that there are actually a lot of restriction. He was right that in healthcare it's not that easy. It's very, very regulated. Even in marketing, they have this MAB, Medical Advertising Board, that regulates all sort of marketing contents that put up, whether it's hard content or it's a soft content. So, but now they have kind of relaxed a little bit, but still it's a very heavily regulated industries. Now, in what we are doing as stem cells, we have to go through this clinical trial. As you know, to prove something in healthcare, it takes a long, long time. Okay, it takes 10 years, 15 years, to come up with a product, a drug, or in our case, stem cells. We still have to go through that type of phase of clinical trials. So I think Cyberjaya is a good place. It's definitely a beautiful place to work. It's a high security, very less crime, and a lot of multinationals. Uh, it's a great place. For us is because we also need that type of dual power supply. That if
Right.
one line is if one line is down, one line is supplied by X number of power plant, the other line is supplied by another set of power plants, so they are kind of independent. So Cyberjaya, because of the server farm, this type of infrastructure is in place for a long, long time. So for us, although our cryopreservation do not need electricity to preserve the cells, but when we do processing, we do need electricity to process the cells. So we are glad to be one of the community in Cyberjaya, and Brighton being probably the first healthcare the ambulatory care center in Cyberjaya, because all the while there are a few clinics here and there, but we are the only first ambulatory care centers. I think I'm still correct, but I know that the government has built a hospital, a huge hospital in Cyberjaya, but it's not operational yet, precisely because there's a demand for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that Sedang is already full, Putrajaya is already full, very packed. So naturally, Cyberjaya is in between, so it can serve the community pretty well.
Yes,
I look forward to
I
it.
think the community in Cyberjaya especially is looking forward to hospital Cyberjaya, which will be completed next mid next year, and which will also be implementing smart healthcare technologies as well. We're
Correct,
very
correct.
happy at CyberView that CryoCord is in Cyberjaya. We consider you to be one of our catalysts in a smart healthcare
Thank you.
industry. So
Yeah.
we are also hoping also to drive
But I
in
want to,
more experts,
yeah.
as you've
But yeah, I
mentioned.
want to, I want to, I think I'm not the only person who actually speak about this. I think I teach us to remind the audience is that we have enough hardwares. All around the country, there are a lot of hardwares. If we are good in building, bringing a machine in but I think what we lack of is really software. Okay,
Right.
the people, the experts, and then the committee, the right-minded guys, the entrepreneurs, bring everybody together, and it'll be good. I think that's the other one. What is it called in Cyberjaya that is they kind of like bring all the startups together.
You mean magic?
Yeah, Magic. Yeah, that's right. So Magic, yeah, is doing a good job. I think through Magic, I think we can also bring this smart healthcare, bring everybody together and brainstorm.
I completely agree, Mr. James. Now, my next question is for Prof. Arasan. Now, in our previous webinar, we discussed on how we can bridge talent and the importance, once again, of collaboration between different sectors to nurture talent. Now, part of Cyberview's initiatives involves working closely with universities and colleges for this purpose, including University of Cyberjaya. Now, Prof, you work with students who will shape and drive the future of Malaysia's healthcare. How do you think can the academia industry collaborations be strengthened?
Sure. Thanks, Nadia, for the question. I think Mr. James have already touched briefly in regards to this collaborative initiative. He is absolutely spot on in the sense that most of us seem to be working in silo. I would not know as a university that we are a university that facilitate medical courses as well as business and tech. We would not know the requirements by the industry. We would not know what else is required by the healthcare facilities and providers. So the notion of silo is making it a bit more difficult for a stronger collaboration. So how is it that, because in essence, everybody seems to be working in this notion of red ocean rather than a blue ocean component. So there are definitely a good opportunity for a stronger collaboration. Now, the central idea behind this is that we have to, as a university, what happens is that we have the talent pipelines. We are producing the talents, but we need to know that university would like to work with the industry. Industry also must have an idea that universities have the capacity to supply, maybe not to the full level, but to a certain percentage, whichever you require. Now, so what happens is that while we are nurturing the talent, we need to have this closer sort of engagement. I think people, organization like Cyberview should be able to facilitate this, where we bring everyone together for exchange of ideas. Your problem statement, bring it to us. We try to address the problem statement through our students as well as the academias. And then we look into this notion of, co-production of certain ideas that can become an actual commercialized product end of the day. So we need to work with you guys, the industries, and that understanding that everybody must come together to work together is already there, but there needs to be a significant level of awareness needs to be given. Okay, so everybody needs to know what's happening within the university, what's happening outside there. Some universities or even colleges within Cyberjaya may not even know the companies that what sort of technological businesses that exist in Cyberjaya itself. We know that Cyberjaya is a hub for technology, but we may not know what is it that they need from us. It could be a business angle, it could be a medical angle, it could be a occupational health and safety and psychology and so on, right? So this one entity that brings everyone closer is, I think that significant role needs to be enhanced further. I think that will bring everyone, to a next level.
I think collaboration is the key word here. Now, Mr.
Yes.
James mentioned about having regulations, such as marketing regulations in the smart
Yes.
healthcare or healthcare industry. So I think here we have received a comment actually from Dr. Andy. He is from Futurize. Futurize is actually a subsidiary of Cyberview, and they have a role of assisting companies to go through these regulations in a smoother process. So here he has commented that most regulators are aware of new innovations, but innovators as well need to understand on the safety aspect, as to that's why we have such laws and acts there. So perhaps it's something that companies like CryoCord and also even universities, Prof, could work with work closer with Futurize. To work on the regulations aspect, because they have their connections with the government. So this could help companies like CryoCord and also even Vita to better deploy their solutions. Now, my next question is for Dr. Ian. Now, before that, I'm seeing that we do have questions in the Q&A chat box. Now, please don't forget also to our audience members to also leave your contact details, just in case we do not have enough time to address all of your questions at the end of today's discussion. So back to the questions, Dr. Ian. Now, you have had the opportunity to be part of our CLLA program. You're an alumni, where you were able to develop and validate your solutions within the city environment of Cyberjaya. Now, in your opinion, besides support like incentives, funding, and mentorship, how important is it to have a holistic tech ecosystem, do you think, especially in growing the smart healthcare segment?
Yeah, I mean, definitely very, very important. It's no question at all. Cyberjaya is a very perfect place to actually test out our product, because it's like a community here. It's a little bit separated away from the main hustle and bustle of KL, but at the same time, it has all the technology available and hardware available. So, I mean, what I see Cyberjaya is like basically the role it plays is very important as to set an example for the rest of Malaysia. So when you can see what is possible in Cyberjaya, where we have all the tech working together to make our lives better. So, that's the main purpose of having all this technology, right? When you have this all working nicely in Cyberjaya, it just sets a good example for the rest of Malaysia to follow. So once we do that successfully in Cyberjaya, I have no doubt that we can actually get this to go implement in other hospitals, other clinics around Malaysia, and basically show people that it's possible. Like how the often told story where the person who ran the mile under 4 minutes actually set the first precedent for the rest of the 300 people after that can follow. So you just need one person to set a good example, and after that you break that psychological barrier, and then everyone else will follow suit. So yeah, that's what Cyberjaya is doing now.
All right, now, Dr. Ian, I think you are an inspiration to many, startups out there, especially those who want to go into the healthcare sector. Now, let's go to our questions from the audience. Now, Mr. James, earlier you mentioned about having access to government incentives from the MOH Ministry of Health, and that's why you chose to be in Cyberjaya. We have a question here from Michael. He says the Minister of Health is generally viewed as a laggard in relation to the widespread use of healthcare tech across public hospitals in Malaysia. So how can the MOH drive greater adoption of healthcare across the public healthcare sector, and where should they start?
I just want to clarify, actually, we didn't get any grant from Ministry of Health. It was incentive through Ministry of Finance,
Ministry of Finance.
all those MDEC companies,
Right.
MSC status companies. So yeah, how do we work with Ministry of Health and regulation is probably in the audience, probably a lot of people still don't know that there's actually a regulation for stem cells. It's called CGTP, Cell and Gene Therapeutic Acts, products, CGTPs. So these are supposedly to be implemented by next year, January next year, 2021. But the industry as a whole is not that ready yet. So the NPRA, which is the regulatory agency, NPRA, National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency, the enforcement agency, just like the FDA, has given the industry a little bit more time and stretching up to another 3 years before we can really fully market the products as a therapeutic products. So yes, Ministry of Health is being. I've got no any working relationship with any other ministry except the Ministry of Health. And Ministry of Health is, I view them as very, very professional. They are in talk with just not only FDA, but all over the regulators around the world, Singapore, Taiwan, Japan, everywhere in the world. So they know what they are doing. In our line of work, just like drugs, we have to take through the pain of proving it through trials. So it's a long shot, but actually it's worth it because the barrier to entry is actually very, very high. If anyone wants to do the same thing, have to start all over again, as I say, I think any ministry should be that commercial. They must understand commercial. They shouldn't play any part in the commercial. They should play only the part on regulating. That's why I think sometimes you get a politician come in the middle and kind of like have some interest here and there. That would be pretty bad. But overall, I think for the government as a whole, they should be looking at the environment. They should be about regulation. They should be looking at promoting the right sectors and education and things like that. So I hope that I can see that Cyberjaya has got the very conducive environment. In terms of healthcare, we have to bring a little bit more in. We know there's a lot of IT works going around, but healthcare industry like us is still at a very nascent stage. Singapore has this place called Biopolis. Okay, A-Star is a hub that only develop medical biotechnology. Right? In Malaysia, when we still want to buy certain reagent for our research, we still have to take a long time, maybe like 2-3 months. But in Singapore, if you want it now, probably within a week you get it. Because a lot of this distributors still based out of Singapore. But they of course they have a lot more research over there, and probably the requirement is that they have a lot more stocks than us. Whereas in Malaysia, we have universities, a lot of research are done in universities, and universities sometimes they want their own, they want their own, and then sometimes they may overbuy some of these stocks and never use them. So a lot of wastage. So you can put everything in one place for research, for biotech research, from healthcare research. That would be ideal. I think we can also save costs on that.
Okay, thank you for your input, Mr. James. Very good points there. Now, we also have a question from the audience for Dr. Ian. Now, Dr. Ian, he asks, how do we address these two major issues? Okay, one is improving healthcare literacy, particularly in the mid and low groups of the population. Perhaps it's something like what we mentioned earlier, what Prof. Arasan mentioned earlier about going and accessing rural areas. And number two, generally, we see low participation rates for people managing their own health and wellness, which can lead to reduced rates of NCD. How can the health tech or smart health play a role in driving better participation?
Okay, so yeah, Michael, thanks for hitting the nail on the head. Actually, that is great insight that you have. So one of the issues is definitely health literacy in the rural population, in the mid and low group income sector, right? So what we are trying to do at Vita here is actually we convert that into 3 languages, because we just don't want to display English medium, because a lot of these people may not understand English, right? So we have to make it accessible through language, one, and the other thing is through visuals. So these 2 ways, I think it makes everyone more have the access to their own information through these 2 ways. So that's how I see how we can improve healthcare literacy. It's not necessarily educate people in English, you just have to make it in their language and make it diagrammatic. Okay, so number 2, the low participation rate for people managing their own health and wellness. Well, I mean, this kind of it's a bit of a self-initiative, but also a little bit of scare tactics as well, I feel. So, I mean, the more you know, the more you want to prevent, right? So again, that's what we are trying to address here with our app. And because everyone has access to a smartphone, you don't really need to buy a computer anymore. The smartphone can already provide you computing power to calculate for you health data, what it means for yourself. Yeah, so that's how we try to do that.
Okay, now we also have some questions from Niam Sit Wei from Bernama. All right, so number one, his question is on the budget wish list. Last year, the allocation for the healthcare sector rose 7% to 30.6 billion ringgit from 28.7 billion ringgit in the previous budget. So what is the healthcare players' wish list for 2021, 2021's budget? Now, maybe I could ask this question to Mr. James in a moment, but let me just read out the other two questions first. And also, could you comment on Malaysia's smart healthcare outlook as compared with other developed countries, given that currently we already have several apps like My Sejahtera to track COVID-19 patients? That one, I think I will give that to Prof. Arasan. And the last one, what do you think the government should do to have more support to the development of smart healthcare? I will give that across the board. But first, number one, Mr. James, what would you say would be on your wish list for the 2021 budget?
Oh, okay. As far as healthcare is concerned, I think it's not so much a budget. I think a lot of money has been spent, and Malaysia has been spending, trying to find for fund here and there, and you know that we are running deficits for so many years. So we should also look at, my advice to the Ministry of Finance is that we should be looking at reorganizing and restructure the whole Malaysian healthcare system, especially the public hospitals, because there are so much wastages in there, and you see that the certain services provided like blood tests, for example. Blood test is a very, very competitive industry. So if I were the government, if I'm the Ministry of Health, I was saying that let's look at outsource this to someone else, to private sectors to do it. Okay, get them pay a certain upfront money to get committed, and then by doing outsourcing a lot of services within the Ministry of Health, I think we can bring down the cost. Okay, so without just increasing the budget so much to healthcare, maybe by 1 or 2%. I think they're asking for 6% increase, but maybe 2% increase. Okay, it may not be enough, but we can save costs. I think by reducing costs, saving costs within the public sectors itself is able to transform the healthcare industry in Malaysia into a much more efficient. Now, of course, technology-wise, right, we need to do this digitalisation of healthcare, which is ongoing. Yeah.
Okay, Prof, you did mention that Malaysia is on track in the evolution of smart healthcare, but perhaps could you expand a little bit more on how we are compared to other developed countries in the sector? Prof, you're on mute.
Okay, thanks, Nadia. And okay, so I think it's a quite a decent question to try to understand where we are in terms of our development and growth stage, as opposed to a developed or even as opposed to our neighboring countries. I think without having a proper understanding on what's our trajectory of smart healthcare, it's a bit difficult to compare with other countries. But if you're looking at technology development per se, there have been certain statistics in the past that to showcase that Malaysians generally we tend to adopt new technologies far more better than compared to other players, other countries. We generally have this notion of we would like to try out new things, and our community, the Malaysians in general, are very fast to embrace it. While you see the lack of integration between industry, the academia, the citizens, as well as the government, that lack of collaboration is always there. Because of that sense of lack of collaboration, what happens is that a nationwide smart healthcare transformation becomes a bit more challenging, and I would like to say it becomes a bit more delayed. So while we are already there, we have, I think, like what COVID has shown to almost all countries, including ours, is that we got to transform immediately. You don't transform, you perish. As simple as that, right? So what happens is that the notion of things like the My Sejahtera app, for that matter, what happens is that a lot of people do not understand what is this My Sejahtera app all about. We know it is about something to do with tracking our so-called current health condition, and it gives us a tracking of where we've been moving around and so on. But people do not know what happens to the data end of the day. Who is holding this data? You know, what else is being projected through this data? This, I think this is a similar concern for people in the urban as well as rural areas. We know we must have the app because government has already put forward this app to us. It is a nicely done app. I think within a short span of time, someone managed to get it done. A very good effort. So to take our smart healthcare transformation further, we need to kind of give a very clear indication. All these tools, gadgets, and so on that we are using in order to track people through this sort of app. What happens next? What is the evolution of this smart healthcare, for that matter? This My Sejahtera app. The My Sejahtera app, the way I see it is that it has a greater capacity to evolve further to become the next level of government tool to kind of have a greater understanding of Malaysian health behavior. So, but the notion is that we must use the app, but what happens when we use the app? That awareness, that information sharing must happen. Now, I believe a greater information sharing will accelerate our smart healthcare usage because people have concern about privacy, ethics, those sort of things. There's also a new concern of AI-based ethical consideration, AI-based data privacy, and so on, right? So in essence, we are moving. However, we need to get our entire community to be involved. We need to give them the information so that we move together in this transformation process. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question. Before I go to the last question for everyone across the board, there's one for Dr. Ian. Dr. Ian, our audience member here is asking, do you have any plans to collaborate? Because having multiple providers like yours might pose to the overabundance of available healthcare apps, just like e-wallet. So what makes Vita different?
Well, I mean, the purpose of being in Cyberjaya is for the collaboration. So that is very important. And we actually don't mind many players in the same industry as long as we're all providing a different service to a different niche, right? So for us, we are all about information display and information sharing. And maybe others are more about providing the service. So, we have different roles to play. So collaboration is definitely number one key. And that's what we hope to do at Cyberjaya as well. Yeah.
All right. Now, for everyone, for all of our three panelists here, what do you think the government should do to give more support in terms of the development of smart healthcare? Let's start with Mr. James first.
Of course, more incentive would be better. But giving just hard cash is not good enough, I believe. So it has to be a balance between the believer, the innovators, and the government. So for every dollar you put in, perhaps the government can come in another dollar in a different way. Okay, not necessarily cash, but maybe like subsidized payments, subsidized rental. In our industry, for example, I would like the government to provide some assistance in clinical trials because there's a huge amount of money to put in trials. One trial itself may range between a small one about 5 million to a bigger one about 30 million for trials. So if the government say that, okay, look, these are the hospital facilities and you can actually use that, for very minimal fee, then that will help our industries.
Dr. Ian?
Yeah, I mean, actually, just want to echo a little bit of what Mr. James has mentioned earlier. Is that government has to look at what the private sector can do as well, because right now the government budget is all towards operations and doing what is currently just to maintain the current operations, right? Mostly 80% is like just to maintain the service and all that. So it's not sustainable and it doesn't encourage growth if you're just thinking about operations. In order to actually encourage growth, you have to look at what the private sector can do, because private sector is definitely more capital efficient. There are providers out there like for hospital information systems or clinic information systems that are in private that are better than what is being used in the government. But the problem is that these private providers actually find it very hard to enter the government ecosystem, because there are a lot of established government service providers for IT at the moment, and you just need to look out there what's available already in the market to know that there's a lot more efficient products out there that can integrate better, integrate faster than what the government system can do. Yeah.
And lastly, Prof. Arasan.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the government is the digital leader here in the effort forward towards digital transformation and smart healthcare. The government is the leader. So as the leader, I think one main perspective I'd like to highlight is to technology adoption should be about cost reduction. So we don't want a scenario where smart healthcare actually escalates the cost to the users. We would like to see government to actually lead the whole scenario of digital transformation in healthcare by ensuring that the adoption of technology brings down the cost to the users. So when the cost is lower to the users, because in the long term, the efficiency is propelled basically. So if the cost is lower, I think the support for the adoption of smart healthcare becomes a bit more clear and a bit more widespread. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think we have learned a lot here on how we can transform Malaysia's healthcare, and this is through innovation, of course, disruptive technology. It's still something very new, but I think we received a lot of good pointers in today's webinar discussion on how we can move forward and not move in silos, but move together as one singular unit. So I see that it is already past 12 noon. Thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you to Mr. James, Dr. Ian, and Prof. Arasan for being part of Cyberview's webinar on smart healthcare. Now, I'm afraid we were not able to address all the questions that were posed in our Q&A chat box, but please do keep updated on our social media as we will address them through our social media platforms. So thank you to all of our audience members. And once again, thank you to our panelists. Do stay tuned for the next Cyberview webinar. So here's to a better smart healthcare industry in Malaysia. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you.